For his ideal film, Kevin Costner risked everything by mortgaging his accountant pleaded with him not to spend $38 million of his beach house funds on it. His own money. He didn't watch the first film, and he made less than he invested, but he's having trouble finishing the remaining portions, so he's selling items, and friends claim that he is functioning on a wing and a prayer because he is transferring money around. Here's what's actually happening to Kevin Costner, who is currently trapped in a nightmare. Costner was born in Linwood, a small Californian town, in 1955. Parents were not wealthy or well-known. His father dug ditches before becoming a tragedy had already occurred involving a utility worker and his mother receiving welfare services. Occurred before Kevin was even born, and his middle brother passed away at birth. Kevin and his older brother Dan were the only ones remaining. His family history was a German, English, Irish, Scottish, Welsh, and even Cherokee ancestry were all mixed together. Pious Baptists, and life was straightforward, albeit difficult at times, with no one paying attention. What little youngster could have imagined that he would grow up to be one of Hollywood's biggest stars? Due to his father's work, Kevin's family relocated frequently, so he was always the new kid. Transferring schools between communities, such as Compton Ventura and Visalia, struggled to make friends since he was insecure and bashful, although instead of giving up, he began to daydream and turn to poetry and music for solace. He also joined the church choir. I continued to compose poems in private, never sharing them with anyone at school. Leave a lasting impression, but something else did when he watched the movie at the age of 7. Something about the vast, open frontier struck him hard when he read how the West was won. The unvarnished nature of it all remained in his heart. The film sowed a seed that didn't even realize would develop into the tales he would eventually depict on movie, but initially Kevin had a really major concern. He was just 5 feet 2 inches when he graduated from high school. He once questioned his mother if he would ever grow up because he was so little and anxious about it. "I swear you are going to grow, honey," she said, and she was right. Over the following few he grew 11 inches throughout the years, reaching 6 feet 1 inch. Doctors refer to that as catch-up growth. It's uncommon, but he was tough before he became famous. He played football and basketball. And playing baseball in high school, competing against much larger children. One of his Dennis, Bert and Kevin, baseball friends, even made it to the professional ranks. Although Kevin didn't become a sports star, yet after graduating, he never lost the will to battle. In 1973, Kevin took a risk and became fixated. In order to follow the Lewis and Clark expedition's path, he constructed a canoe by hand, which wasn't very attractive. However, it worked. He put it on a dilapidated truck and drove off by himself, paddling. Bury my heart at Wounded Knee under the rivers and camped in wild places. Stars. That book opened his eyes by revealing the heartbreaking reality of what Native Americans suffered, and it affected him. He sobbed every night while reading it. The trip altered his perspective on the world and influenced the way he would tell stories in the future. It wasn't simply about history. He became very concerned about the past that summer, especially after seeing movies like Dances with Wolves. Came about a few years later, giving voice to those who had been silenced. In 1978, Kevin experienced something that most people wouldn't believe unless it were in a movie script. Gotten married and was seated on the plane returning from Mexico with his new bride. Richard Burton, one of the finest actors of all time, was on the same flight. Even though all the seats around him had been purchased by Time Burton, Kevin still approached. Waited silently and requested a brief opportunity to speak. When Kevin told him something he hadn't even mentioned to his wife when he opened his eyes. Didn't want a life full of drama but wanted to perform, so Burton glanced at him and stated, "You have green eyes." "I agree, you'll be alright." That's short. As their jet touched down, a peculiar moment lingered with Kevin as Burton's limousine drew. Burton rolled up next to Kevin and his spouse, who were waiting for a cheap bus. I said to him, "Good luck." That was the end of that one moment. Altered everything. After only a month, Kevin resigned from his marketing position. Began attending nightly acting courses and taking on odd jobs to help pay the bills, like as driving trucks and fishing boats, even offering bus tours of famous people's houses. He wasn't famous, but there was a spark inside him. He had no money, no contacts, and no obvious route, but his conviction in Kevin was the one thing that mattered more than everything else. Costner's career didn't start with lavish salaries and red carpets. Instead, it started with a destitute and desperate in the late 1970s. He later wishes the movie had never been made. Played a part in the low-budget film Sizzleby USA, which wasn't released until Costner already lamented the movie's soft-core content by 1981. Aspects, and as Costner was filming one of its private sequences, he felt something inside him shatter. He made the decision immediately that no matter how long he had to wait for actual employment, he would never do anything similar again. That choice came with a cost for almost 6 years, barely making ends meet with side employment and minor gigs. He even attempted to purchase the film's rights afterward to ensure that no one would ever see it. However, the distributor declined, and after he gained notoriety, he exploited his identity to sell tickets. Get a few parts, but nothing altered his life. He was cast in The Big Chill as the reason the others got back together was because of the man who had killed himself. He shot all the emotional and powerful flashback scenes were deleted by the filmmaker. Every scene has been removed, leaving only the image of his lifeless body in the opening was meant to be his big moment, but it was just a face with no lines or credit break, but instead another door smashed in his face, so he continued playing a supporting part in Francis, an unmemorable face on an Apple Lisa commercial, a couple more short pictures that no one had seen, but he felt invisible and the casting directors couldn't recall his name. Subsequently claimed that every day his family had, it was like being the new kid at school. Moved around a lot when he was younger, and even though he felt lonely in Hollywood, he persisted. He waited in his dream before the phone rang. The same director who had removed him from The Big Chill, Lawrence Kasdan, felt bad because he recalled how excellent Costner had. He offered him another chance, a genuine one, even though no one else saw it. In Silverado, he promised him not just any part, but one that would ultimately allow Costner to demonstrate his abilities. It worked. Costner was endearing, humorous, and people saw that he was full of enthusiasm, and they recognized him from that movie for the first time. New Doors, one of which was the 1987 release of The Untouchables. Big stars, enormous budgets, and Costner somehow earned the lead even though he wasn't. The studio's Mel Gibson, Jack, and Harrison Ford all passed the first choice, which wasn't even close. Nicholson, but Steven Spielberg, who had previously collaborated with Costner, endorsed he was correct when he told the director, "This guy's going somewhere." Costner, who co-starred with Sean Connery and Robert De Niro, held his own. After the film earned over $100 million, Costner suddenly wasn't no longer a struggling actor. He was a star, but he continued to celebrate his next Bull Durham was his move, and he wanted it to be genuine rather than merely acting. Before filming began, he made the director watch him play baseball. Struck on both sides of the plate, he threw, he raced, and he demonstrated his ability. The movie companies didn't think a baseball movie could sell, so he carried it. Costner helped disprove their claims, since the film earned over $50 million and received positive reviews. Adored it. A year later, he worked on the quiet, odd film Field of Dreams, which was about a farmer listening to sounds in a cornfield. If you construct it, he will arrive, and that line will become a piece of American culture. The movie earned about $85 million and won an Oscar. Nominations that are still cited today. It created memories in addition to revenue, and by 1990, Costner desired more than acting. He founded TIG Productions to produce the films he thought would be the first. Dances with Wolves Studios claimed it was too lengthy, too dangerous, and too strange. Instructed him to remove the scenes in Native American languages. He refused. He refused to reduce the budget, saying that he had invested millions of his own dollars, which could have destroyed him. Rather, it earned him nearly $400 million and 7 Oscars. Continued, making The Bodyguard with Whitney Houston yet another risk. Triumph at the box office, grossing over $400 million, and the soundtrack became the years after no one else believed in it, the soundtrack to the best-selling film of all time. He did it again with a project called Horizon, financing it with a mortgage on his ideal home. Identical heart, identical risk, identical thinking, and identical motivation. Since Kevin Costner doesn't wait for approval before sharing a tale, instead, he creates it. Kevin Costner didn't only put on a show, he spent 9 months studying for Dances with Wolves. Lakota Sioux dealt with Native people, not simply saying a few words here and there. American advisors and demanded that around 1/3 of the film be in. Because of Lakota's audacious decision, 2 studios were hesitant to release the movie. However, Orion Pictures took a chance and hired Doris Leader Charge as a 60-year-old Lakota educator who spent 6 months coaching the entire group and translating the script. Stated she made more money in that 6-month period than she had ever made while working as a teacher on the Rosebud Reservation. But despite everything, when some Native audiences saw the movie Russell Means, they chuckled. As noted by an Oglala Lakota activist, a lot of the male characters. Costner was among several who continued to use the feminine Lakota dialect. Was one of the first instances in which an indigenous language received such a large amount of screen time in a Hollywood movie, and people took notice. Hollywood was rocked on March 25, 1991, when Dances with Wolves won an Oscar. In front of around 43 million people, it took home 7 of the 12 Academy Awards. Costner was only the 7th person to win Best Director for a debut picture at the nominations. Additionally, the film defeated Scorsese's Goodfellas and received a nomination for Best Actor. And a lot of people continue to debate whether that was reasonable, but the Academy clearly, the expansive frontier epic was preferred over the grim mafia classic because Costner acknowledged that he hadn't trusted himself when he stood on stage with his Oscar. Dances with Wolves, however, became the first Western to win Best Picture in 60 years as a result. Days after completing Dances with Wolves, Costner continued to work hard for years. Barely had time to relax before diving into Robin Hood Prince of Thieves. Was so tight that he performed the majority of the motion himself, skipping the stunt doubles. Leaped over mows, climbed castle walls, and even injured his shoulder in the process. Act was using a catapult to launch himself over a 10-meter tall wall that meant that they needed to figure out the physics down to the pound. Around 5,000 kilograms of force was required to make it perfect. One day, a stuntman on a French set offered to between takes. Costner found magic mushrooms and shrugged it off, especially because, "Nick, you ate mushrooms. We're going to have a sword fight scene, be brandishing swords in an hour," he declared, as airplanes continued to thunder overhead. From Heathrow Airport, damaging their takes and making them redo the tiresome castle climbs again, and when JFK arrived, it wasn't simply Jim Garrison. The New Orleans DA, was portrayed by the Battle Costner in another part. Who thought that Kennedy's killing was the result of a conspiracy. Oliver Stone, the director, wasn't holding back. The movie implied that the military, CIA, FBI, and even the vice president might have been months before it was even made public. It sparked a frenzy among journalists. Government representatives and historians referred to it as harmful, but Costner didn't. He retreated, telling Time magazine that merely posing these queries constituted because any discussion of what could be the truth can only make us freer, he said. Claimed that his goal was to make the audience take him seriously, not to prove Garrison correct. And it was successful after the film was released in the U.S. in December 1991. In 1992, a law allowing the public access to confidential JFK assassination documents was passed. To the general audience, but in 1992, Costner made what was arguably his best career decision. He could have accepted a $10 million upfront payment from the bodyguard, but instead he bet on the movie's success and requested a cut of the earnings. He waited for Whitney Houston's schedule to open up for a full year since he felt she was ideal for the part, and he was yes. The film was released on November 25, 1992, the same day that Disney's Aladdin came out, and earned $16.6 million during its first weekend of operation. $410.9 million globally. In Japan alone, it generated more than $21 million and turned into the sum of Warner Brothers' greatest hits. Box office receipts and music royalties was more than $20 million, possibly as much as $30 million. For the soundtrack that features Houston's more than $50 million copies of the iconic rendition of I Will Always Love You were sold. Costner's wager had paid off twice at the Grammy Awards for Album of the Year. Money, and once more in legacy, Kevin Costner was a member of the Hollywood elite, but everything began to fall apart in 1994, starting with the film Waterworld, which should have been his biggest hit, but a hurricane made it into a nightmare. It wasn't simply rain that destroyed the floating set on the Hawaiian location during production. $5 million, and that wasn't even the pricey one that was part of the main set. The atoll weighed more than 1,000 tons, was a quarter of a mile broad, and cost $22 million. Due to a shortage of personnel in Hawaii, steel had to be shipped in from California. Costner nearly drowned after being tossed off a boat with his co-stars. He was handcuffed to a mast. The stunt coordinator had to be evacuated to a hospital due to compression sickness. The budget burst, beginning at $65 million and rising to $100 million and $135 million. And ultimately reached $175 million, plus an additional $60 million for marketing. And it turned into a $235 million wager in that unprecedented Independence Day in 1995 only cost $75. Millions began referring to it as Kevin's Gate and Fish Tar, despite the fact that it earned money afterwards from home video, but the harm was already done. He wasn't merely a film. He was no longer a star but rather a joke. And then the drama with the director Kevin. After 133 wretched years, Reynolds, his Robin Hood buddy and partner, resigned. He departed with a harsh remark that Kevin should guide himself, and that's precisely what he should do. What Costner did was finish the movie by himself while his 16-year-old son claimed that his personal suffering showed in his actions on stage when his marriage ended. To make matters worse, tabloids reported that Costner desired digital. He denied having hair inserted to disguise his balding head, termed it, and claimed he never worked while intoxicated or high, but the rumors persisted, and others made fun of him, claiming he was conceited. They claimed he was challenging, which led to his being labeled a diva. Couldn't shake, so 2 years later he tried The Postman again, but it blew up. Even Raz's award for Worst Picture, Worst Actor, and Worst Director went to Harder. He was nominated for and won every category, which had never occurred before. Critics in 1998 weren't merely tired of him, they wanted him to go, yet he persisted. He returned in 2003 with an old-fashioned open range that had no gimmicks or fireworks. He starred alongside Robert and directed the school western with passion. Duvall gambled on himself, and it cost $26 million and made almost $68 million globally. And it worked this time. He then stunned everyone by playing Mr. Brooks in 2007. A serial killer who hides behind a flawless smile is not a hero or a cowboy. It was one of the best things he had ever done, but it was also ominous and unsettling. Scared you with his good guy persona, and it worked. By 2012, he was taking home Emmys. The grim violence of Hatfield's and McCoy's nearly prevented genuine Costner from taking the position. He declined 3 times, but when he did, the outcome was more than $14 million. When he won Best Actor at the premiere, people watched and reminded Hollywood why they adored him initially, and he continued to work on the movie Hidden in 2016. He took action because he was in excruciating discomfort from kidney stones. Despite the fact that the pain left him bruised, he never missed a day of morphine. After lowering his sleeves and continuing to shoot, he arrived at Yellowstone in 2017. Costner wasn't sure if he agreed with Taylor Sheridan's request that he play John Dutton. Conditions for only 1 season, but when the show debuted in 2018, it gradually became a huge success. It wasn't an event with a lot of glitz or trophies, but people adored it, and in the first season, he made $500,000 for each episode, which is an enormous income, but it also increased as the show's popularity soared. At that rate, he was earning $1.3 million every 14 episodes by season 5. Offered him $18.2 million in a single season, but in 2023, that wasn't enough. According to reports, he was knee-deep in debt when he requested $1.5 million each episode. This didn't fit well with the American saga in his ideal project, Horizon. Previously, the show's producers' filming schedules conflicted with 8-week shoots. Costner had scheduled Horizon during Yellowstone's off weeks, but those off weeks didn't work out. It all came crashing down in early 2023 when the producers offered Costner declined to give him a cut-up deal for seasons 5A and 5B rather than the entire season. John Dutton was killed by his decision to turn to Horizon, and it wasn't a noble one. Fans were startled to learn that Dutton had been discovered dead in a bathtub with a note close by initially appeared to be a suicide. However, 2 episodes later when the truth was revealed, 3 hitmen dispatched by Sarah killed him by suffocating him. They attempted to make it all seem real by faking the suicide and leaving a false note. Disappear, but it didn't work. After identifying the discrepancies, a homicide investigation was launched. Then, Sarah Atwood was shot twice in the head and chest, killing her. Didn't even realize his last episode had aired until the following day, he acknowledged at a reunion with Jamie Costner. "I heard it's a suicide," he stated in an interview the morning after, "doesn't entice me to see it." He had previously suggested 2 endings for Dutton, but neither was utilized. Instead, the Costner publicly dismissed the call that the show made, but others Costner took home more than $24 million from the cast, who were paid $200,000 per episode. Millions of viewers watched the last season, yet the show failed even without him. Record 16.44 million viewers, surpassing the 15.9 million who saw the 5B premiere. Who had witnessed the 5A debut 2 years prior, and it began with just 2.8 million in season 1. Costner had already made the transition to Horizon, which was more than just a movie. Was his fixation. After Open, he began composing it in 1988 and couldn't stop. He attempted to pitch it to Disney in 2003, but they turned him down for a $5 million budget dispute that remained unresolved for decades until 2022, when he eventually discovered the support, but at a cost. He mortgaged his 10-acre property. He described the place he termed his last home as an oceanfront property in Santa Barbara. He was investing $38 million of his personal funds in Horizon through his accountant. The terrified accountant answered, "It's my